Alright. Pardon me. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start off this week by nodding to what's already been said. These readings were really cool. I wasn't quite expecting such a literal interpretation of the stories of the medicine men and the visions and stuff, so I found it very interesting. As always, Tyson made some great points this week. Made me laugh when you said that weirdos like us would think that they were hallucinating or that something was wrong with them if we received a vision or a request from an animal or, something like that. If an animal started talking to me, I probably as well would either, first I would think, well, there's something wrong with me, and then I would think, this is the best day of my life. You made an interesting point about medicine men and their inside knowledge. It made me think immediately of the Pope, because he's supposed to be like God's inside guy. I thought it was kind of interesting that he doesn't have vision quests or premonitions or anything like that. And I also find it interesting because I bet you if he did, everybody would take it very literally. Whereas looking at these stories, people are very quick to scoff and laugh at them and stuff. So I think that's interesting because it really depends on perspective and it depends on who's talking about these kinds of things. Because if it's someone who's obviously in a really high level of respect and authority, people are going to take it more seriously, and I guess it does hugely depend on the culture as well, because they were so in touch with nature, the indigenous people, they were so in touch with nature and the earth that they were obviously more willing, more inclined to believe that talking to an animal or an animal talking to you would be a possibility, because they saw animals as more like equal living things who are deserving of just as much respect, which I think is really awesome. And then, of course, he mentioned that something we could learn from them is to slow down and observe our surroundings a little bit more. And I can agree more, as I mentioned in some of my other videos. And then he said something that really struck me, and that was that we are all from Earth. And I love that, because it really doesn't matter what your background is, or what culture you came from, or what color your skin is, or what shape or size, or whatever, what kind of person you are. We, at the end of the day, are all Earthlings. And I think it's up to us to learn how to share this earth better than we have been, and to protect it and to take care of it. So in that sense, I think that the indigenous way of life really, really had it right, especially in terms of just respecting all living things, and not just taking for the sake of taking. Faith made a good point about connection to animals as well, making your life more full, and I can agree more with that as well. I've never not had a pet. I think that it's really quite beautiful how you can form such a close, strong bond with another living thing without ever having spoken, a shared language with it. I think that that's really cool. It's just the language of body language and food, I guess, and security, and just unspoken friendship, which I think is really cool and very fulfilling. And Faith also mentioned the benefits of the sun, which I think is a really good point and something that we could take away from these readings and from the indigenous way of life and traditional ways of life, is just that we need to spend less time in front of a screen, less time holed up inside, and more time with our faces in the sun, because that's just what a life. Who doesn't need more sunshine in their life, for real? And then Marsha's post, I couldn't agree with you more, Marsha, in that I was a little bit skeptical of some of these things, reading them too, because it's difficult not to be, coming from a culture like ours. You mentioned that you kind of had a little bit of a laugh or a scoff, and it's hard not to sometimes, right? Like, these ideas seem so different from anything that we're used to. And then you mentioned that, how would we know that these visions and this stuff isn't because they were starving themselves and fasting for so long, which I think is a pretty good point, because how would we know, what's they would they know, that just kind of made me laugh, because I think probably a lot of these visions and stuff like that in history that have been documented could probably be chalked up to just something going on physically, but I don't know, that's just my inner skeptic talking as well, and I swing wildly between being this open-minded person who wants to believe in all of this spiritual hoodoo stuff, and then I swing wildly back to being a believer of science and thinking that everything has an explanation and da 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 da. So I'm very torn about that, but your post just kind of made me laugh. And it also kind of made me think about other religions and other cultures and, stories that they have. And I think it's really interesting that there are stories that exist, like, say, the one that popped to my head right away was the burning bush. Moses in the burning bush, and he gets a message from God through this burning bush, apparently. And he goes and tells everybody, and everybody believes him, and yet believers of this religion are probably the same people who would be very quick to scoff at stories from medicine men, which I think is very interesting, and that brings me back to what I said about perspective. It really, really just depends where you're coming from, I guess, when you approach these stories, because it just, a lot of them reflect the values of the people, right? And if you don't share those same values, it would be easy just to scoff at them. Yeah, anyway, pretty much everything that I have written down, I had to scribbled a bunch out because it's already been mentioned. Just pretty much everything in the reading would seem very bizarre to somebody who has never been exposed to ideas like that before. I wrote down this quote from page 7 because I really loved it. It said, "The society in which we live tends to isolate the facts of experience and then accept only those facts that support already popular beliefs and dogmas." So it's kind of along the same lines of like, you will pick and choose out of it what resonates with your beliefs, and then the rest you'll just kind of brush off and ignore or scoff at. And that is a huge thing in our society nowadays. I mean, even just with stuff about, I don't know, just like, relative everyday issues, like COVID. I see it all the time. People pick and choose what facts or what information they choose to believe in, and then everything else they just are like, nope, that doesn't line up with my views, so I'm not gonna listen to that. And I think that that's kind of the point that Deloria was trying to make here, or I can't remember if this was in the prologue, it might have been Deloria's son, but I think they're just trying to make the point that if you go into something with certain expectations, you're only going to get out of it, what you're going in to find. Maybe I totally misinterpreted that, I'm not sure. But yeah, I wrote down observation of the physical world, be present, mindful. We need to be more in touch with spirit. I think we've completely lost touch with that. Obviously, weird society might find the idea of communicating with animals and with nature very strange. I pulled this quote from page 93, where Deloria is talking about why these messages from animals and things were so important. And it says, "Sometimes this phenomenon occurs to teach the human that in spite of different shapes and talents, the universe is a unified tapestry and not a collection of isolated, unrelated entities." And I thought this was really cool because it was their belief that everything was connected, and that's something that we have become completely disconnected from. And it's almost as if there's this whole web of nature and humans are just over here, and we're just stuck. And we need to find our way back over here and learn how to exist properly with nature again, because what we're doing right now is not sustainable, and I think we can all agree on that. Boop, boop, boop. And then I just wanted to touch on something that Deloria said in one of the videos from the lecture, and that was about technology and about how us in Western societies, we lack this sense of community. Usually, most of us do. I know I do. And because we don't have this sense of community, it leaves us with this feeling that something's missing and that we need something more. And it's a search for something larger than ourselves. And I think he described it as a craving for authenticity. And that really struck me because it's almost this inexplicable feeling of, I guess, like longing or looking for something that you don't really know what you're looking for. And maybe that is what I've been feeling, is this lack of a feeling of community, because it really sometimes feels like you're the only person on your team. And I know that a lot of us have really good, support systems and everything, but at the end of the day, usually most of us go home either alone or almost alone, and it's strange, because I don't think humans were ever really meant to be so isolated. Even with our personal devices and everything, it's not the same. It's not the same, and it doesn't feel like a community. And then one more story that I will mention before I close off here, and that was just Luther Standing Bear's story on page 100 about the black-tailed deer dodging his bullets, because I thought that was pretty crazy, and that stood out as weird to me, for sure. He mentions that he popped off a bunch of rounds at this deer and that it just stood there and looked at him, swished its tail, and then hopped away, and that he wasn't a nervous guy, he was an avid hunter, and so that struck me as very unusual. Stories like that obviously would be very quick to be dismissed by our society. But yeah, so things that we could take from the society, just pretty much the same facts, or points, sorry, not facts, same points that I've made in my other videos, is just that we need to slow down and reconnect ourselves with nature and just learn how to live more sustainably. And I guess more simply, because we're just really overcomplicating things for ourselves for no reason, and it's really doing a number on our collective mental health and our individual mental health. So yeah, that's the 10-minute mark, so I'll probably cut myself off there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.